Dr. Laurie Todd Smith joins us. She now needs a business card that has two sides on it because the title is long. Assistant Secretary for Early Childhood Development with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. She was instrumental in some of the work that has been done in early childhood education in the state of Mississippi and was rewarded by moving to the federal level. Dr. Todd Smith, good morning to you. Thanks so much for some of your time.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
And congratulations. What an honor to see your work recognized at the state level and get this opportunity to try and act some of those same changes at the federal level.
Yes, it is. It's very rewarding. You know, I worked under the first Trump administration as the director of the Women's Bureau, and many of the same topics of helping and focusing on early childhood education was what I did at Department of Labor back in the first administration. So to have this second opportunity to be directly having oversight over all the early childhood programs in the United States is quite an honor that I do not take lightly, working hard to do the best I can with it.
You know, when we see people move into new positions, especially when the scope of work is as large as the scope is for you, we hear that phrase, drinking out of a fire hose. Has it felt like that for you in making this transition? Initially just trying to kind of wrap your mind around maybe what the goal is or what the goals are, and then trying to move toward implementation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you mentioned that I needed a 2-page business card. I think my whole career has really prepared me for this job. I feel I've been on the receiving end at a state level and understanding how the funds come to us in states. So to be now in the federal level, I feel like I'm a translator in the office. I tell people, oh, wait, this is how Mississippi perceived this regulation you have. You have not been clear, and we need to fix this. And so it is a lot of information, and it's a lot of dollars. I oversee Head Start, child care, tribal home visiting programs, and these preschool development grants. And totals up to $25 billion. And I every single day think about how Mississippi could have benefited more had we better understood or had these funds been more flexible. So yes, I feel like I'm drinking out of a fire hose in a lot of ways because the details of those regulations are so lengthy, but I actually feel more prepared for this role than I have for any other job except for teaching little children, which was my favorite, but here we are. So it's the perfect time in my career, and I have a lot of gray hair to show those battle scars over the years as well.
I want to get into the Mississippi stuff in a little bit, but you talk about the money piece of this, overseeing a $25 billion budget with responsibility for allocating that money with multiple programs all over the country. And yet one of the things that we've heard, whether it was through the DOGE work or through the new tax and spend bill with the big, beautiful bill that's still being debated in Congress, and we'll see where that goes, is that there are going to be cuts. And people have talked about the abolishment of the Department of Education. In terms of funding for some of these early learning programs, are you concerned about that funding remaining in place, about the amount of money that's going to be in place and how that's spent?
Well, that's another good question. I think the cuts and the discussions you've heard about DOGE and what I'm experiencing here at the Department of Human Services have been very important cuts of things that I think are really saving taxpayer dollars. And so I know there's been some discussion about Department of Ed closure. I have never heard one discussion yet that services and information and money getting to the states and the families that need it the most is going to stop. So I think a better way to look at it is there may be cuts, but the cuts are going to be on anything that's not actually doing just that. So we are all very much focused on trying to increase transparency of where these dollars are being spent, more accountability of how they're being spent, and ways we can reduce the federal oversight and let states do what they need to do. So there was some discussion about the president's budget for Head Start that I oversee. It's a $12 billion program that serves over 800,000 children nationwide. The president's final budget shows it at level funding, and it's a program that serves the most vulnerable children in our nation. So you could see adjustments. Those decisions are made by Congress, but I do think there will be a continuation of these important services. There's no better time in a child's life than to implement better health and nutrition, early literacy efforts, and all of those things happen so much before the age of 5. And so meeting parents at the early childhood level just makes so much sense to the priorities of the administration.
We're visiting with Dr. Laurie Todd Smith, who was one of the architects of the Mississippi Miracle, if we can refer to it that way. She's now Assistant Secretary for Early Childhood Development. That falls under the HHS umbrella, where Robert Kennedy is the secretary. And so much of what he has talked about publicly has been to do with health. I mean, we've heard about getting rid of food dyes and making America healthy again. And that report, the Make America Healthy Again report, has recently come out. There's a lot of data in that. How does that tie into what you're doing with early childhood development?
That is another great question. If you go to the, you're good at your job. If you go to the MAHA report, and I strongly recommend, if you haven't read it, I pulled a few statistics just to share with you, but over 40% of 73 million children between the ages of 0 and 17 have at least one chronic health condition happening. We know that 1 in 5 children ages 0 or 1 to 6 are obese. And so that's a 270% increase since 1970. And we know that 80% of obese teens continue to be obese into adulthood. And so the data and statistics in this report are alarming. And so if you think about the lens of working with Head Start and 800,000 children, and our CCDF program that works with 1.3 million children in the United States, it's a great opportunity to implement some of the great ideas presented of how we can look at nutrition differently. Head Start has nutrition standards. We're looking at revising those. We are considering putting out for some public comment, feedback about barriers to providing healthier food, how to get away from serving processed food in these centers, how to partner with USDA and make all of these entities focus on health and nutrition. So again, even in my own experience of being a preschool teacher back in the day in Starkville, Mississippi, I know that parents would come to my classroom and say, I don't know what to do about this. What snacks are healthy? What is not healthy? And it was very confusing, but they were so open to my suggestions, and that preschool program really provide a foundation for the parents too. And it's the same in Head Start nationwide. It's a perfect opportunity. When I taught 5th grade, it was much more difficult to speak to parents about child nutrition and other things. But when they're young like that, it's such a lifelong skill they can learn.
It's interesting to me the way these things tie together. We've got about a minute and a half to the break. We've got more coming up with Dr. Laurie Todd Smith. And I don't know if this would be anecdotal from your experiences or if the answer to this question would be data-driven, but can you tie childhood nutrition to education outcomes?
I don't have that data in front of me, but I guarantee it has an impact on cognitive function and a child's ability to learn to read. I had children in my classrooms that didn't have breakfast, that didn't have snacks at home, that didn't have healthy diet, and came to school tired and hungry, and it's very hard to focus on science and social studies and history when you have some of those basic needs not met. So absolutely is a tie to that, and brain development of young children. So I'd be happy to pull that for you.
Sure. Dr. Laurie Todd Smith is the Assistant Secretary for Early Childhood Development with the Department of Health and Human Services. We'll turn our attention to Mississippi. Can you imagine a decade ago or 2 decades ago that Mississippi would be the example, would be the template for others in how to educate children? Well, that's where we are. We'll talk with Dr. Laurie Todd Smith about that on the other side of this quick timeout. You're listening to Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk, Mississippi. We're back right after this.
Because when you're all laid up in traction, cut you out.
9-5. Dr. Laurie Todd Smith is my guest, working now in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services as Assistant Secretary for Early Childhood Development. Prior to that, she was right here in the state of Mississippi and was involved in revamping, in a lot of ways, the way early childhood learning happens here. The Mississippi Miracle, as it has been referred to in the media, and a lot of national coverage has happened. I would love for you to debunk something for me first, because anytime we talk about this, we get messages on the text line that say, well, they're just teaching to testing, and I know you've heard the complaints as well, where people want to diminish some of the results. But if everybody's testing the same way, and everybody's being measured the same way, in my mind, there's no way to diminish what has been accomplished in terms of growth of early education in Mississippi. You had a front row seat. You were one of the architects. How did we get here to this point where we are? And when you hear those naysayers, what do you say to them?
Well, I think if you don't fully understand all the changes that we implemented in 2013, it might lead you to believe that we're just teaching to the test, or perhaps we're only focused on the higher achieving students. Honestly, I don't listen to too much of it, but what's so interesting to me is the data speaks for itself. There is only one assessment in the United States that is an apples to apples comparison. And in 2013, only 33% of Mississippi's third graders could read proficiently. Today we were 50th in the nation. I pulled this up when you mentioned what we were talking about next. I found the original PowerPoint that I went around the state talking from. In 2011, we had 16,000 children not graduating from high school. Our cost of remediation in college was $25.5 million. We only had 33% of our kids reading proficiently, and we had a literacy crisis. And what we did, with the help of the Barksdale Reading Institute and many other state leaders, this bill, and it's funny to me that a lot of states think, oh, we're just going to do what Mississippi did now and it will happen. But that's the secret sauce, if you will. There were so many great components of that bill. Holding kids back was the last resort. The things that I think and know really helped the bill was we retrained every kindergarten through third grade teacher in the whole state of Mississippi on how to teach reading, on the science of teaching reading. And everyone talks about that being back to the basics, but there's key pieces of that called phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. If children can do those things, they can read proficiently. And so teachers were retrained on that. We also put reading coaches into the lowest performing schools. We also met with all the deans of the colleges of education and made changes to how the professors teach future teachers on how to teach reading. And the biggest piece is assessment of children. Children were all assessed in different ways back in 2013. Today, they all have the same kindergarten readiness assessment, and parents get notes home about those assessments 3 times a year from kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade. So they've been assessed 12 times before they are actually held back, and lots of interventions happen. So those notes that go home to parents also include activities they could do at home. They include so many great ideas. So the fact that our whole state rallied around reading, including parents, families, radio show host. Paul Gallo was a big proponent and helped us send that messaging out. The Barksdale Reading Institute, Governor Bryant's leadership and willingness to stand up. The headlines were hilarious at that time. 5,700 children are going to be held back. I think the parents' campaign said, parents scream, there must be a better way. And now everybody in Mississippi feels so proud of this bill, including the naysayers. So I think it's a real success and testament into leadership.
And it's been talked about nationwide. Lars Larson's show, which is on this network at night, he's pointed to it a lot. And one of the things that he has talked about is it's not just money that is being thrown at what was the problem. It's kind of this top-down approach that you just outlined a second ago, because the allocation per student in Mississippi is far less than it is in other states where they are spending a lot more money per student, but they're not getting the same outcomes.
Absolutely. And that's something I'm sharing a lot at the federal level now, the Mississippi story. We did it as a state with the most vulnerable children, with the highest poverty levels. We designed our own program with no federal assistance in how to do the program. So it makes a great argument. Let states do what they do best and have the federal government get out of the way to do that. So that's exactly what we're trying to do here.
You know, it's interesting to me how you can take a single statement and it can be interpreted two different ways, right? You can take the statement, well, if Mississippi can do it, anybody can, or we can do it too. And there's almost a negative connotation there. Or you can say, you know, if Mississippi can do this, we can do this too. And you completely flip the way that it's perceived. As you are talking to people, talking about the progress that Mississippi made, explaining the way that it happened, are you getting more of the latter, where people are looking at that through a positive lens as opposed to through a negative connotation?
Yes, I think so much time has passed now that the state rankings have truly shifted. We're 9th in the nation for reading proficiency right now of our young kids.
That really is remarkable.
It is. And I remember being in Mississippi and looking at the state of Massachusetts as our northern star. I thought, boy, they are doing all this. They were the highest test scores, everything. And I met someone from that state recently, and they were begging me, can I call you and find out what you did in Mississippi? So it doesn't seem to be so much of that, thank God for Mississippi, what you used to hear, and more, how can we do it? I just worry about how people think it's the simplicity of it. I worked with Arkansas's governor on her Learns Act that she passed a couple of years ago, and she brags and says, we just did what Mississippi did, and they did take a large part of our literacy work, but she added some other pieces that were specific to Arkansas. So I think every state has to design that as they need to, but I'd really love if states would dig into those components more of what we did that really made the difference. But in my opinion, and my research background tells me, if it works in a state like Mississippi with kids in poverty who are now surpassing the national average, I think it's more likely that would work in other states than if you reverse that. If it worked in New York, would it work in our state? Probably not. So I think Mississippi is a great model for other states, and I get calls every day about it.
Just a couple of minutes left with Dr. Laurie Todd Smith, who is now working in Health and Human Services as Assistant Secretary for Early Childhood Development. One of the huge debates in the legislature over the past couple of years, and we anticipate going into this 2026 legislative session, has been about school choice. We know that the Trump administration has been pro-school choice. You've had a chance to see the way that it works in other states. Our legislature has not gone down that road. There has not been agreement between the House and the Senate. What are you seeing? Where do you fall? Obviously, we know where the administration falls in that conversation, specifically as it pertains to Mississippi.
Yeah, back in 2013, another thing we did that year, besides the Literacy-Based Promotion Act, was pass the charter school bill, and subsequent years a little bit more school choice, but not a lot has moved in Mississippi, as you know. My previous job right before here was with America First Policy Institute, where I worked with many states on trying to expand school choice. When I started in 2021 at America First, we had 0 states nationwide with universal school choice. Today we have 17 states with universal school choice. Mississippi is not one of them. I think the timing is perfect for that to happen right now, and I'd love to figure out how to help. I think you've probably heard about the big, beautiful bill, and included in that is a tax. I love saying it. And the tax credit in there would actually give some Mississippians a ability to have school choice through a tax credit scholarship for individuals and organizations that choose to donate to a scholarship entity and get that deduction. So you could see more school choice coming to you if that's continued to pass. It went through the Senate and they provided some real leadership on it. So I think Mississippi has a huge opportunity to now brag about the Mississippi miracle and continue that through school choice.
Dr. Laurie Todd Smith, I can't thank you enough for your time. I know there's a ton on your plate right now and appreciate you working us in. Enjoy the conversation and continued success to you with a heavy load on your shoulders.
I appreciate you including me so much. It's nice to see you again, too. Take care.
Thanks for being with us. Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk, Mississippi. If you missed any of that conversation, you can go back online and grab it at supertalk.fm. You can get the podcast so that you can listen at your convenience. What an incredible story. Dr. Laurie Todd Smith, now working in the Trump administration under RFK as Assistant Secretary for Early Childhood Development with the Department of Health and Human Services. Quick time out. We've got more coming up with you. Half an hour left. So on MRC.